Smith had handled million-dollar emergencies with a steady hand. Numbers never shook him. Deadlines never rattled him. But when he picked up his phone that afternoon, expecting another routine discussion, everything inside him shifted. "Hello, who is this?" he asked, barely glancing away from the financial report in front of him. The pause on the line stretched longer than any silence he'd ever endured. "It's Michelle, from 4 years ago." His breath stalled. His fingers froze mid-turn of a page. For a man who believed in order, those few words felt like someone had reached inside his chest and pulled the ground out from under him. Before he could process the shock, she added, "We need to talk. It's about your daughter." The report slid from his grip. Sheets of paper drifted across the desk, brushing against his wrist as they fell, yet he didn't move to catch them. His jaw tightened. His heartbeat hammered so loudly he almost wondered if Michelle could hear it through the phone. His chair felt suddenly too small, the room too warm, the air too thin. A daughter? His daughter? The phrase repeated in his head like a siren, each echo cutting deeper than the last. He felt his pulse in his throat, his palms growing damp, his breath turning unsteady. He wasn't prepared. He wasn't ready. He wasn't anything close to steady in that moment. Smith, the man who handled corporate chaos with near-perfect precision, couldn't even form a sentence. What do you mean?" he finally whispered, his voice cracking in a way it never had during board meetings or public speeches. The office outside his door continued its usual rhythm, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, footsteps crossing polished floors. But inside him, everything had stopped. He felt a pull in his chest unlike anything numbers or business ever created. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't have an answer, a strategy, or even a sense of control. Only one shattering truth rang clear. This call was about to rewrite his entire life. Have you ever been moving through your day, convinced everything made sense, only for life to stop you with one unexpected moment? The kind of moment that forces you to rethink not just what you're doing, but who you are. Maybe it was a message you didn't expect. Maybe it was a voice you hadn't heard in years. Maybe it was a truth you thought would never circle back to you. We all have that one memory we tucked away because facing it felt too heavy. A decision we thought we left behind. A night we convinced ourselves no longer mattered. But life has a strange way of circling back at the exact moment we feel most secure, tapping us on the shoulder and whispering, "You're not done with this yet." Smith wasn't the only one who knew that feeling. Anyone who has ever held on to a secret, avoided a difficult conversation, or tried to protect themselves by staying busy understands exactly what shook him that afternoon. Because deep down, we all know the weight of hearing something that changes everything we thought we understood. And just like Smith, once the truth appears, nothing goes back to the way it was. Smith stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear as Michelle's words settled into him like a weight he wasn't prepared to carry. He had a daughter, a child he never knew existed, a life connected to his in a way that no business deal, no success, no accomplishment could ever compare to. Everything he built, his stable routines, his spotless reputation, his identity as a man who kept his world perfectly controlled, suddenly felt fragile. One call threatened to shift the foundation he trusted for years. He didn't know what Michelle would say next. He didn't know what this meant for his future. He didn't even know if he was capable of becoming the man this situation demanded. All he knew was that his past had reached him, and this time, he couldn't turn away from it. Smith swallowed hard, trying to steady the tremor in his voice. His mind raced through every memory of that night with Michelle, her laugh, her honesty, the way she looked at him like she actually saw the man behind the polished suit. He'd carried that memory quietly for years, never expecting it to come back with a responsibility this enormous. A daughter. His daughter. The words gripped him so tightly he struggled to breathe. What was he supposed to do now? Walk away again? Pretend he never picked up the phone? Pretend he wasn't hearing the most important truth of his life? No, that wasn't an option. Not anymore. Questions pressed into him like a rising tide. Was he ready to face what he left behind? Could he repair the damage of disappearing without a word? Would Michelle ever believe anything he said now? Could a man who lived by spreadsheets, deadlines, and control learn how to be present for a child he'd never met? And deeper still, questions he didn't dare voice. Was he capable of being a father? Was he worthy of it? One call had pushed him to a crossroads where running was the old version of him, and choosing courage was the only path forward. So now the real story begins. Not just for Smith and Michelle, but for anyone who has ever wished for a second chance, or feared they didn't deserve one. If you're watching this right now, please like this video and drop a comment below, because it truly helps push the story out to more people who need to hear it. And this is one story you don't want to miss. Welcome to Mr. Steve Stories, where everyday moments turn into powerful, unforgettable tales. If you're joining us for the first time, we're thrilled to have you here. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the stories that move hearts, spark imagination, and remind us what truly matters. Now that you're here, let's step into today's story. Early autumn in Chicago didn't arrive quietly. It drifted through the South Side with a crisp breeze that carried the smell of grilled food, children's laughter, and the everyday rhythm of a neighborhood built on pride and community. The sidewalks outside Michelle's apartment were lined with families preparing for cooler weather, sweeping porches, adjusting jackets, and greeting one another with warm familiarity. Michelle watched all this from her window as she tied her daughter Sarah's hair into 2 short puffs, trying to tame the curls that always fought for freedom. "Mommy, make them even," Sarah demanded, squinting into the small mirror she held in both hands. Last time, one was bigger than the other, and Auntie Mel said, "I looked like a lopsided cotton candy." Michelle laughed softly and adjusted the puff. "Well, we can't have you looking like an uneven snack, can we?" Sarah grinned, revealing the missing tooth she bragged about every day. She was 4, determined, curious, and quick to ask questions that left Michelle scrambling for answers. She loved glitter, applesauce, and anything pink. But more than anything, she loved understanding the world. Sometimes too much. "Mommy," Sarah asked, twisting around on the bed, "why do some kids have a daddy who picks them up, but I don't?" The question landed like a quiet punch. Not new, but never easier. Michelle kissed her forehead, steadying her voice. "Sweetheart, every family is different. Yours is filled with lots of love." Sarah accepted the answer for now, sliding off the bed to grab her small backpack. But Michelle felt the question settle into her chest the way it always did, tight and uncomfortable. Her life in the South Side was full of color and chatter, but behind the noise she carried a weight she rarely shared. As a pediatric physical therapist, she dedicated her days to helping children learn to walk again, stretch again, move again. Parents looked at her with hope, and she returned it with patience and strength. Yet outside the clinic, she was a single mother navigating life with bills stacked neatly on the kitchen counter, schedules taped to the refrigerator, and a heart that had learned to move quietly through disappointment. Michelle wasn't ashamed of raising Sarah alone. She just wished she hadn't been forced to do it without closure. 4 years ago, she met Smith at a tech conference mixer. She'd gone with a friend who begged her to attend, promising free snacks and interesting people. Michelle agreed mainly because she needed a distraction. What she found was conversation that made her laugh, a connection she didn't expect, and a night that softened her in ways she didn't admit out loud. The next morning, she woke up to find Smith gone. No warning, no explanation, only a note that felt far too short for the night they shared. She cried once, then closed the door on that chapter. Life moved forward because it had to. But when she discovered she was pregnant, everything inside her shifted. She wanted to tell Smith, but his number no longer worked. The conference organizer couldn't provide contact details. His last name was too common to search on her own. And as the months passed, she chose to pour her energy into her child instead of chasing a man who didn't stay. Michelle built a life she was proud of. Still, every so often, the grief of unfinished conversations whispered through her thoughts. The South Side shaped her into a woman who stood tall even when the world leaned heavy. Neighbors admired her, a mother with strength in her eyes and warmth in her smile. Yet only she knew the shivers of doubt that surfaced when Sarah brought up fathers. This morning felt different. Sarah's question lingered longer than usual, tightening something in Michelle's stomach. She walked her daughter downstairs, greeted familiar faces, and watched as Sarah rushed toward her sitter with excitement. "Bye, Mommy," she called, waving dramatically. Michelle waved back, but her mind was already drifting somewhere else, toward a truth she had avoided for years. She still had the number. She'd found it by accident 2 weeks ago, after searching through old files while trying to declutter her storage boxes. It was written on the back of a business card Smith gave her the night they met. She hadn't realized she kept it. Ever since, she'd stared at that card every night before bed, tracing the faded ink with her thumb, wondering what would happen if she dialed it. Would he remember her? Would he deny everything? Would he care? Would it open wounds she finally learned to close? But Sarah deserved answers. She deserved identity, connection, clarity, not silence. Michelle went back upstairs, sat on the edge of her bed, and pulled out the card again. The room was quiet, too quiet, and the weight of her decision pressed against her chest. Maybe today, she whispered. She picked up her phone. Her hand trembled. Her breath shortened. Smith had been a page she never expected to revisit, but motherhood had forced her to be brave in ways she never planned. She typed the number once, deleted it, typed it again, deleted it again. Her heart pounded. She pressed the digits one final time. As the phone began to ring, she felt the world tilt, her past and future lining up in one moment she could no longer avoid. She was ready. Or at least ready enough. Because for Sarah, she had to be. Smith's mornings always began the same way. Precision wasn't just a preference for him, it was a shield. At exactly 5:15 a.m., his alarm chimed with soft tones. He would open his eyes at the first sound, swing his legs over the side of the bed, and sit upright for 10 seconds, breathing deeply before standing. His penthouse in northern Chicago remained dim until he commanded the lights to rise. Not because he needed calm lighting, but because he needed control over his space, his environment, and above all, his mind. His kitchen counter gleamed with a level of polish that only came from a professional cleaning crew who visited more often than necessary. His utensils were arranged by size in straight lines, his coffee beans measured precisely, and his entire morning process unfolded as if he were following a silent script. To others, this level of routine might have felt suffocating, but to Smith, it was grounding. Predictability kept his emotions quiet. It kept memories at a distance. It made his world feel manageable. After a simple breakfast and a review of overnight emails, he stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Lake Michigan. The water was calm today, which always soothed him, though he would never admit why. Calmness reminded him of something he rarely felt inside: peace. He dressed in a navy suit tailored with such accuracy that even the fabric seemed to obey him. His shoes were polished, his tie perfectly aligned. Everything about him reflected a man who constructed his life on discipline and restraint. But beneath the flawless exterior, emptiness lingered. Not a loud emptiness, just a quiet absence that made itself known in the silent moments between meetings, or in the evenings when he came home to an immaculate space that echoed with loneliness. As CEO of a major cybersecurity firm, Smith's days were filled with pressure. Investors demanded constant growth. The board scrutinized every decision. His staff relied on him to be infallible. Years of leadership had trained him to keep a neutral face even when stressed. He had learned early that emotions were liabilities in the world he occupied. Still, no matter how tightly he controlled his hours, there was one memory he couldn't fully dismiss. 4 years ago, a conference mixer he never planned to attend. A night he didn't expect to remember. A woman he didn't expect to feel drawn to. Michelle. The memory didn't return often, but when it did, it arrived with clarity he could never explain. She had been different from everyone else in that room. Unfiltered, grounded, warm. She spoke to him like he was a person, not a position. She teased him gently about his stiffness. She made him laugh in a way he hadn't in years. She listened as though she actually cared about what he said. And when he opened up, far more than he should have with someone he barely knew, she didn't judge him. She softened him. He hadn't planned to leave so abruptly the next morning, but his father had called him at dawn, summoning him to New York with a demand phrased like an order. Smith rarely disobeyed his father, not because of respect, but because of a lifelong pattern of pressure and manipulation. In the rush to pack and catch a flight, he left Michelle a note. Short, insufficient, a hollow goodbye to a genuine connection. He intended to reach out later, but life and expectations swallowed him whole. By the time he returned to Chicago months later, he convinced himself that the moment had passed. He filed that night away as something fleeting, beautiful but finished. He never imagined it was unfinished. As he drove to the office this particular morning, the rhythm of traffic around him was familiar. His assistant greeted him with a stack of documents. His team awaited decisions. Meetings blurred together. Quarterly earnings, client proposals, a discussion about expanding into government contracts. Every task required focus, but he moved through them mechanically, almost detached, as if watching himself perform. He paused only once during the day, staring out his office window as a strange, uninvited thought crept in. Is this all there is? He quickly dismissed it. He didn't have time for reflection. He had responsibilities, deadlines, expectations, and a subtle ache in his chest that had lingered for years, though he never acknowledged it aloud. By mid-afternoon, he sat at his desk with the quarterly numbers displayed on his screen. He reviewed the figures line by line, but another sensation tugged at him, one he couldn't name. A heaviness, a prickle of anticipation he didn't understand. His phone buzzed. He almost ignored it. Unknown number, but something nudged him to answer. He cleared his throat, straightened his posture, and pressed the screen. Hello? Who is this? The voice that responded didn't invade the room loudly. It slid in quietly, yet somehow carried the weight of a storm he wasn't prepared to withstand. It's Michelle. From 4 years ago. The pen in his hand loosened. His breath stumbled. The memory he buried resurfaced instantly, sharper than before. Of all the possibilities he anticipated in life, a surprise audit, a failed contract, a market crash, this call wasn't one of them. He wasn't ready. Not emotionally, not mentally, not practically. Her voice held something he couldn't identify. Strength, maybe, or exhaustion, or both. Before he could ask anything, she continued, We need to talk. It's about your daughter. His world shifted. Not violently, but completely. A daughter? His daughter? The room tightened, the air pressed against him, and every ounce of control he built over 4 decades began to crack. Smith exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself as the truth wrapped around him with force he couldn't escape. For the first time in years, he felt completely unprepared. And utterly human. The phone vibrated across Smith's desk, interrupting the steady hum of his office. A private number. Nothing unusual. Executives handled unexpected calls all the time. He reached for it while skimming a financial projection, barely giving the screen a second glance. His voice came out calm, practiced, disciplined. Hello? Who is this? For a fraction of a second, all he heard was air. Not static, not background noise, just silence, long enough to feel intentional, long enough to make him glance up from his paperwork. Then he heard it. Smith. It's Michelle. From 4 years ago. Her voice slid into the room softly, yet it struck him harder than any business crisis he had ever faced. His hand froze. His pen rolled off the table. He blinked once, twice, trying to make sense of something that felt impossible. Michelle. A name he hadn't said out loud in years. A memory he guarded privately, tucked away so deeply he convinced himself it no longer mattered. She sounded older, steadier, like a woman who had lived through things he couldn't define. His throat tightened. Michelle, he repeated, barely above a whisper, as if saying her name too loudly would break something delicate. She exhaled, not sharply, but with the heaviness of someone carrying truth on their back. Yes. It's me. He leaned back slowly, every inch of him suddenly aware of the moment. His chest felt tight. The room felt warmer. The quiet on the line pressed into him. 1,000 questions scattered across his mind, none of them forming whole sentences. Why now? Why after so long? Was she okay? Did she call by accident? Did she need help? Did she hate him? Before he found clarity, her voice returned, more fragile this time, yet filled with resolve. We need to talk. It's about your daughter. His vision blurred for a moment as the world around him seemed to shrink into those 7 words. The report on his screen faded. The city skyline outside his window dimmed. His heartbeat roared in his ears. Daughter. His daughter. The phrase struck him with a force he could physically feel. His hand hovered uselessly in the air, unable to decide whether to grip the phone tighter or let it fall. He swallowed, but the motion didn't ease the dryness in his throat. Michelle, what do you mean? He asked, though part of him knew exactly what she meant. The memory of their night together, replayed in a single pulse, clearer than it had been in years. Her reply wasn't rushed. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was simply honest, perhaps too honest for a man who built his life on stability. "Smith, you have a daughter. She's 4. Her name is Sarah." Every muscle in his body went still. His chair no longer felt supportive. The air felt heavier, as though the truth itself altered the oxygen in the room. He pressed a hand to his forehead, trying to steady the swirl of emotions hitting him with relentless force. A mixture of disbelief, regret, fear, and something deeper, something he didn't yet have the courage to name. He should say something, anything, but the words refused to form. Michelle continued, her tone controlled, but weighted. "I'm not calling to blame you. I'm calling because she's been asking questions. She deserves to know who her father is. I tried for years to move forward without making this call, but she deserves answers." Her voice wavered, not drastically, but enough for him to feel the strength it took her to say all of this. He closed his eyes. He inhaled sharply. His heart pounded so intensely, he felt it in his fingertips. A child. His child. How many birthdays had he missed? How many first words? How many moments that would never happen a second time? Guilt stabbed through him, not because he had chosen to leave, but because he didn't even know she existed. The weight of what he lost without realizing it crushed him with each passing second. "Michelle, he paused, breath unsteady. "I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know." "I understand," she said softly, though her voice carried years of exhaustion. "I'm not asking you to explain. I'm just asking you to listen. We need to meet. You need to see her." The word "see" trembled through him like an earthquake. Sarah, his daughter, had a name. His daughter existed, and she had lived 4 years without him. He stood from his chair, pacing slowly, fingers gripping the edge of his desk as though it were the only thing keeping him anchored. His entire life, every routine, every accomplishment, every carefully built structure, felt suddenly irrelevant. He didn't know how to breathe correctly. He didn't know how to think. He only knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had to meet her. He had to see her. He had to try. "I'll come," he finally said, voice firming not out of confidence, but necessity. "Tell me where. Tell me when." Michelle didn't respond immediately. The pause carried history. 4 years of unanswered questions neither had been brave enough to confront. "I'll text you the address," she said eventually. "Thank you for answering the call." The line disconnected, leaving him standing in a room that no longer felt like his. Smith lowered the phone slowly, staring at his trembling hand. For the first time in his life, he felt the ground beneath him shift entirely, not from failure, not from pressure, but from truth. A daughter. His daughter. Everything changed in a single moment. My love, before we continue deeper into this emotional journey, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments, because your engagement truly helps this story reach more viewers who love powerful storytelling. Smith barely remembered the drive to the south side. His hand stayed tight on the steering wheel, his thoughts looping endlessly around the same truth: he had a daughter. The city blurred past him, each turn carrying him farther from the world he built and deeper into a reality he never imagined. His usually calm breathing felt uneven, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like the man who controlled everything. Traffic thinned as he left the towering buildings behind. The streets changed. The air shifted. The atmosphere felt richer, busier, more alive. People talked loudly from porch to porch. Kids raced each other down sidewalks. Music flowed from passing cars. Every corner held its own energy, and to Smith, it all felt unfamiliar. He parked on a narrow street lined with older buildings, each with stories etched into the brick. As he stepped out, his polished shoes made him stand out immediately. A group of teenagers glanced at him, then at his car, then back at him with amused expressions. A woman pushing a stroller slowed to look twice, whispering something to a friend beside her. Smith tugged at his suit jacket, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked. He had thought dressing professionally would show respect, but now he realized it only made him look stiff and noticeably different. He checked the address Michelle sent him. Apartment 3B. With a deep breath, he walked toward the building. His heartbeat was louder than the noise around him. Every instinct told him to turn back, take time to think, plan, prepare. But it was too late for that. He was here. And somewhere inside this building was a little girl whose life was connected to his. He climbed the stairs slowly, one hand running along the rail. When he reached her floor, he paused. A few children played in the hallway, drawing chalk shapes and laughing loudly. One of them stopped mid-game to stare at him. "Why you dressed like you going to a meeting?" the boy asked. Smith blinked. "I just came from work." "Oh," the boy said, nodding like he understood something important. "Well, don't step on our drawing. We worked hard on that." Smith stepped over it carefully, adjusting his steps to avoid smudging their chalk masterpiece. When he finally reached 3 billions, he raised his hand to knock, but hesitated. His palm felt damp. This door separated him from a truth he couldn't reverse. Once he knocked, everything changed. Before fear could grip him completely, the door swung open. A little girl stood there. Curly hair in 2 puffs. A spark in her eyes. A pink shirt decorated with tiny stars. She looked up at him with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. This was her. Sarah. His daughter. His breath caught. She tilted her head, examining him with the seriousness of someone far older. She scanned his suit from top to bottom, then placed her hands on her hips. "You look like you don't eat enough rice." Smith blinked. Of all the things she could have said, "Hello, who are you? Why are you here?" this was not on the list. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. I suppose I could eat more." She nodded firmly, satisfied with her assessment. "Yeah, you look hungry. Mommy says people who don't eat right look tired." "You look tired." He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Something warm tugged at his chest. This tiny person, blunt and sweet and entirely unaware of the earthquake she was causing in his life, was speaking to him like they'd met 100 times before. Before he could respond, Michelle appeared behind her. Her eyes met his. Time stretched, not awkwardly, but heavily, with years of unspoken questions between them. She wore a simple shirt and jeans, her hair pulled back, but her expression carried strength. "Smith," she said quietly. "Michelle," he replied, voice softer than he expected. She stepped aside. "Come in." As he walked through the doorway, he felt the full weight of stepping into a world built without him. The apartment was warm, lived in, scattered with toys and books on the small shelves. It felt nothing like his sterile penthouse. It felt real. Sarah moved confidently across the floor, grabbing a drawing from the table. "Mommy, look. I made this earlier." Michelle smiled. "It's beautiful." "Show Smith." Sarah marched up to him and held it high. It was a picture of 3 figures, a tall one, a medium one, and a small one holding both hands. "This is me," she said, pointing. "That's Mommy. And that's, She paused, eyes narrowing as she studied him again. "That one kinda looks like you." Smith's throat tightened. He crouched down so he was closer to her height. "May I see it?" he asked gently. She handed it to him without hesitation. His hands shook as he held the paper. Behind him, he felt Michelle watching, not with anger, but with guarded hope. The air in the room shifted. Not tense, not heavy, just different, like everyone was taking their first step into something unknown. And for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Smith didn't want to step back. He wanted to move forward. Smith didn't know what he expected after stepping into Michelle's apartment, but he certainly wasn't prepared for the whirlwind that was Sarah. Before he had even taken a full look around the living room, she had already decided exactly what she wanted from him. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to a spot on the carpet between 2 stuffed animals. She didn't wait to see if he agreed. She simply assumed he would. And surprisingly, he did. He slipped off his jacket, folded it neatly, old habits, and placed it on the arm of the couch before lowering himself awkwardly onto the floor. His expensive suit pants creased sharply, but he hardly noticed. Sarah was already bringing a small plastic container toward him. "What is that?" he asked. "Stickers," she announced proudly. "I'm gonna decorate you." He blinked. Decorate? He hadn't decorated anything since elementary school, and even then, it wasn't voluntary. Sarah popped open the lid, revealing sheets of colorful stars, hearts, and cartoon animals. She sifted through them with the seriousness of a surgeon selecting instruments. Michelle watched from the kitchen counter, arms folded, eyes soft but cautious. Smith felt her gaze, not in a way that made him uncomfortable, but in a way that reminded him these moments mattered far more than he understood. Sarah placed the first sticker, a bright yellow star, on his forehead. Smith froze. Michelle bit her lip to hide a laugh, but the sparkle in her eyes betrayed her amusement. "You're gonna look better when I'm done," Sarah said confidently, moving onto his cheek. "Hold still. Grown-ups always move too much." Smith nodded obediently. "I'll try." As she worked, Smith found himself studying her. She hummed quietly, tapping each sticker to make sure it stuck. Her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked nothing like him physically, but something about her energy, her focus, her insistence on doing things her way, felt familiar. Michelle stepped closer, leaning her shoulder against the wall as she watched. Her eyes softened as she realized Smith wasn't pretending. He wasn't stiff, annoyed, or distant. He was trying. Really trying. "You're doing great," Michelle teased lightly. Smith glanced up at her, well, as much as he could with a panda sticker blocking part of his vision. "I'm following instructions." Sarah nodded sharply. "He's a good listener. Some people aren't." Michelle lifted a brow. "Is that right?" Sarah shrugged. "Yep." They exchanged a brief smile, Michelle and Smith, small, unexpected, but filled with something warm. Neither said a word about it, but they both felt it. After covering his face with a small assortment of colorful shapes, Sarah leaned back proudly. "Perfect. You look better now." Smith didn't dare touch his face. "I'm glad I meet your standards." "You do," she said with a nod. Then she added, "But don't take them off yet. I need to show Auntie Mel later." Smith hesitated. "Is that required?" "Yes." He surrendered. "All right then." Michelle laughed. Soft, genuine, almost nostalgic. It had been a long time since she'd seen this side of herself. A long time since someone brought laughter into her living room without forcing it. After a moment she said, "Sarah, sweetheart, go grab your shoes. We need to get that grocery list done before the store gets crowded." Sarah hopped up. "Okay, but he's coming too." Smith blinked. "I am." Sarah placed both hands on her hips. "Yes, you're already here." That logic was hard to argue with. Michelle looked at Smith carefully, testing him without speaking the test out loud. "You don't have to come if you're busy." She wasn't just asking whether he had time. She was asking whether he intended to stay, even for the next hour. Smith didn't look away. "No, I'm not busy." He meant it. Michelle nodded slowly, registering that answer. She wasn't convinced yet, but it was a start. At the grocery store, the contrast between their worlds became even clearer. Michelle pushed the small cart, checking her handwritten list. Sarah bounced beside her, announcing items before Michelle even reached the aisles. Smith followed, hands in his pockets, earning a few lingering glances from shoppers who noticed the sticker-covered businessmen trailing behind them. Sarah tugged his sleeve. "Carry this," she said, handing him a box of cereal twice her size. He took it instantly. "Of course." Michelle watched him again, observing quietly. She didn't speak, but her mind was alert, analyzing, reading his reactions, searching for signs of pretense or strain. But Smith didn't waver. He adjusted, carried bags, listened carefully, answered every one of Sarah's questions, no matter how complicated or random. In the produce section, Sarah pointed to a bunch of bananas. "Do you eat these?" "Sometimes," Smith replied. She frowned at him. "You need to eat more things. You look tired." Michelle nearly choked laughing. "Sarah, what?" the little girl asked innocently. "He does." Smith didn't take offense. In fact, receiving unfiltered honesty from a child felt refreshing. When they returned to the apartment, Sarah unpacked groceries while humming loudly. Michelle and Smith stood by the table, a small distance between them, close enough for warmth, far enough to protect old wounds. Michelle finally spoke. "You didn't have to come today." "I know," Smith said softly. "So why did you?" He paused, not because he didn't have an answer, but because he wanted to choose the truth. "I wanted to see her, and I wanted to see you. Both matter." Michelle looked down, absorbing that. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. She simply nodded. "Consistency matters," she said slowly. "I'm watching to see if you mean what you say." "That's fair," Smith replied. "I intend to prove it." Their eyes met again, longer this time, steadier. Not with the spark from 4 years ago, but with something deeper, something built from years of silence and one unexpected chance. This wasn't romance, not yet, but It was the beginning of a bridge they were both learning how to cross, carefully, one step at a time. And somewhere between stickers, groceries, and quiet testing, the distance between strangers began to shrink. The sun dipped lower over the south side, casting long golden light across the street as neighbors carried folding tables outside. Music floated through the air, classic R&B that blended with laughter, conversations, and the unmistakable clatter of someone setting up a grill. Michelle didn't plan for Smith to experience anything more than their grocery trip, but when her neighbor shouted from across the lot, "Hey Michelle, we're starting early, bring Sarah," she realized she couldn't avoid it. Before she could decline, Sarah grabbed Smith's hand. "Come on, we're going outside." Smith blinked at the grip of her tiny fingers around his much larger one. "Outside?" "Yes," she confirmed, pulling with impressive determination. "You gotta meet everybody. They'll like your stickers." He forgot they were still on his face. Michelle covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. "You can take them off now if you want." Smith touched his forehead, feeling the edge of a star sticker. "She said it was required." Michelle shook her head, amused. "You really listened to her." "I did," he admitted. And that, from a man who rarely took instruction from anyone, let alone a 4-year-old, spoke louder than he realized. As they stepped outside, the neighborhood shifted from quiet warmth to full celebration. Children zipped past them playing tag. Older men argued loudly over sports predictions. Women arranged trays of food on tables, greeting each other with loud affection. The entire space pulsed with community, something Smith had never truly experienced. Michelle watched him carefully. His eyes flickered across the environment, absorbing everything. The crowded street, the grills smoking with seasoned meats, the piles of macaroni, greens, cornbread, and desserts that couldn't be found in any high-end restaurant. A neighbor noticed Smith immediately. "Michelle, you brought somebody new?" she teased, raising a brow. Sarah answered for everyone, "He's my dad." And I fixed his face. The woman burst out laughing. "Oh, he definitely looks fixed." Smith felt heat creep up his neck but smiled politely. "It's an honor." Michelle nudged him gently. "Relax. They're nice." He nodded, though his body remained stiff, hands clasped behind his back the way he stood during executive briefings. A plate was pushed into his hands before he fully understood what was happening. "Eat," the neighbor insisted. "You too, skinny." This seemed to be the popular opinion today. He looked at Michelle for guidance. "Just try it," she encouraged. He took a tentative bite of the ribs first. Everything in him went still. Flavor exploded across his tongue. Smoke, spice, tenderness, and his eyes widened with a sincerity that made Michelle laugh. "This is..." He paused, searching for words that didn't make him sound dramatic. "This is incredible." "I know," Michelle said proudly. "You've never had real ribs before." He had, once, at a corporate event. They tasted like disappointment compared to this. Sarah shoved a forkful of macaroni toward him. "Try this too." He obeyed. His reaction was immediate and honest. "Why doesn't my food ever taste like this?" Michelle raised her brow. "Because your food is probably scared of flavor." He laughed, a genuine, unguarded laugh, and for a moment, he forgot the weight pressing on his chest, forgot the pressure of his company, forgot the expectations placed on him. Here, in this chaotic, lively, loud environment, he felt something unusual. He felt present. Before he could explore that feeling, a man with a speaker dragged into the middle of the lot shouted, "Dance battle time! Who's brave today?" Children cheered. Adults groaned. A woman nearby called out, "Look at the suit over there. Bet he can't dance at all." Michelle tried not to smile. Smith stiffened. "They can't be talking about me." "They are," Michelle confirmed gently. Another voice chimed in, "Come on, man. Show us what you got." Sarah tugged his hand again. "You have to dance." He froze. "I really don't." "You do," she insisted. "Everybody does." Michelle crossed her arms, curious. "It's just for fun. You won't break." He considered all the decisions he had ever made. None felt as risky as this. But Sarah was looking at him with hopeful eyes, the same eyes he'd only known for a few hours, and he felt something inside him soften. He stepped into the circle. A song blasted from the speaker. People clapped and hollered. Smith swallowed. attempting to recall any dance move he'd ever seen that didn't require humiliation. He moved. It was something. The crowd erupted, not in admiration, but in joyful, teasing laughter. Children fell over giggling. Adults clapped with amused sympathy. Michelle covered her face, shaking with laughter. Oh no, you really can't dance. He stopped, hands on hips. I was under the impression I did something resembling movement. You did, she said through her laughter. But not dancing. Sarah patted his leg. It's okay. You tried. Some people can't dance, you can just stand there and look happy. He had lost, spectacularly. But strangely, he didn't feel embarrassed. He felt lighter, as if the world loosened around him. After the battle ended, Smith walked toward Michelle, brushing imaginary dust off his suit. That was brutal. She grinned. Welcome to the South Side. Their eyes held each other for a moment, longer than earlier, calmer, without the weight of their past suffocating the space between them. Something familiar flickered. Not romance yet, not forgiveness, but recognition. A connection rediscovered, quietly warming. Smith inhaled deeply. Michelle, would you let me take you to dinner sometime? Somewhere from my side of town? Just to talk, no pressure. Her expression shifted, surprised, unsure, but not closed. You want to take me out? She asked gently. I want to understand you, he said simply. And I want you to understand me. She glanced at Sarah chasing children across the yard. Let me think about it. That's all I ask. Before the moment could drift away, he added softly, Thank you for inviting me into this world, even if the dance battle nearly killed me. She laughed again, her real laugh, the one he remembered from years ago. Let's see if you survive dinner first. My love. Before we continue this story, if you're enjoying these emotional twists and heartfelt moments, hit that like button and tell us your thoughts in the comments. Because your engagement helps this story reach more viewers who love powerful narratives. The night of their dinner arrived faster than Michelle expected. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the strap of her simple black dress for what felt like the 10th time. She wasn't dressed extravagantly. She didn't believe in overcomplicating herself, but tonight felt different. Nerves hummed beneath her skin, the kind she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't worried about the restaurant. She wasn't worried about the food. She was worried about stepping into his world again. Sarah peeked into the room, leaning against the doorframe with her usual curiosity. Mommy, are you going somewhere fancy? Just dinner, Michelle said with a soft smile. With him? Sarah asked, swinging her legs playfully. Yes, sweetheart. With him. Sarah nodded. Tell him you like rice. He needs more rice. Michelle laughed quietly, kissed her daughter's cheek, and grabbed her coat. Smith arrived exactly when he said he would. He always moved with precision, but tonight, there was something gentler in his posture. He wasn't wearing the same rigid suit from before. This time, his clothes were tailored but relaxed, still expensive, but warmer. You look beautiful, he said the moment she stepped outside. Michelle felt her cheeks warm. Thank you. He opened the car door for her, not out of superiority, but genuine courtesy. As they drove toward downtown Chicago, the city lights painted the windows with streaks of gold and blue. Neither of them spoke at first, not out of awkwardness, but because silence finally felt comfortable. You don't have to be nervous, Smith said quietly, eyes still on the road. I'm not nervous, Michelle lied. He glanced at her, a soft smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You are... She looked out the window, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of being right. But he was. When they pulled up to the restaurant, a towering glass structure overlooking the lake, Michelle inhaled deeply. Valets moved briskly. Guests stepped out in dresses and tailored suits. Conversations flowed in quiet murmurs. Everything screamed luxury. Smith noticed her hesitation. Michelle, he said gently, if this feels too much, we can leave. I mean that. No, she replied, straightening her shoulders. I want to be here. He offered his arm. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before slipping her hand through. As they walked inside, the soft lighting and calm atmosphere contrasted sharply with the energy of her neighborhood. Here, everything felt measured, orderly, intentional, much like Smith himself. A host guided them to a private table by the windows. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, creating a backdrop that looked unreal. This is nice, Michelle admitted, looking around. Smith smiled. I hoped you'd like it. As they settled into their seats, Michelle felt the familiar insecurity nudge at her. She didn't belong here. She wasn't part of this world. These weren't her people. But when she looked at Smith, she saw no judgment, only admiration. You can relax, he said softly. You're not out of place. You sure? She asked lightly, though the question held real vulnerability. I'm sure, he said with certainty. You being here feels right. Their eyes met, and for a moment the restaurant faded. 4 years dissolved. All that remained was the connection they once stumbled into, the one neither forgot. The waiter approached, handing them menus thick enough to be small books. Michelle glanced at the prices and nearly swallowed her tongue. Smith noticed. Order whatever you want. Really? I wasn't worried about that. She lied again. He gave her a knowing look. Michelle, she sighed. Fine. I've never been anywhere like this. Then I'm glad your first time is with me. Her stomach fluttered, not from the setting but from the sincerity in his tone. As they talked, the conversation flowed naturally. No forced politeness, no awkward pauses. He asked about her work, genuinely invested. She asked about his company, not the numbers, but his life behind the title. He spoke openly in a way she didn't expect, revealing the strain of leadership, the loneliness, the pressure he hid so well. Heavy is the head that signs the paychecks, she teased lightly. He laughed. Something like that. She studied him quietly. The rigid man she remembered wasn't gone, but tonight he seemed softer, realer, human in a way she had never fully seen. That night we met, he said suddenly, voice low. I wasn't trying to escape. I wasn't trying to use you. I felt understood. That scared me. Michelle didn't respond immediately. Her heart tugged at the memory. You didn't seem scared, she said eventually. I was, he admitted. You made me feel things I couldn't control, and control was everything back then. She looked down at her glass. And now, he said carefully. I'm trying to learn how to live without needing everything to be perfect. Their eyes met again, longer this time, and deeper. There it was, not forced, not rushed, not exaggerated. A spark, quiet, gentle, growing. For the first time since their reunion, Michelle felt her nervousness melt into something warm. She sat straighter, breathed easier. Confidence replaced insecurity, not because of the restaurant, but because of the man sitting across from her. You've changed, she said softly. I've had to, he replied. Life doesn't let us stay the same. She smiled. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it is, he echoed. As dessert arrived, their hands brushed briefly across the table, accidental but electric. Neither pulled away. Tonight wasn't about defining anything. It wasn't about rushing into romance. It was about rediscovering a connection they once lost, a connection that, despite everything, refused to die. The weekend after their dinner, Smith found himself standing outside Michelle's apartment again, this time with a quiet confidence, replacing the nerves that overwhelmed him days earlier. He held a small paper bag in his hand, unsure if bringing anything was appropriate, but unwilling to show up empty-handed. He wasn't used to this kind of uncertainty. Business decisions were simple, risks and returns. But this required something deeper. Michelle opened the door before he could knock. You're early. He checked his watch out of habit. Only by 10 minutes. She smiled. That's early for normal people. He relaxed slightly. Is Sarah ready? Almost. She's been excited since she woke up. Before Michelle finished the sentence, Sarah appeared, holding her tiny backpack with cartoon animals printed on it. She thrust her arms up dramatically. I'm ready. Where are we going? Smith asked, kneeling to meet her eyes. To the park, she said proudly. And after we play, you gotta push me on the swing, and we're getting ice cream. Mommy said yes already, so you can't say no. Smith looked up at Michelle as if asking for confirmation. Michelle shrugged. She's telling the truth. Then ice cream it is, he said, standing. Sarah reached for his hand instinctively. He froze, not because he didn't want it, but because the gesture hit him harder than he expected. Tiny fingers wrapped around his, trusting him without hesitation. He tightened his grip, gently. At the park, Sarah darted toward the playground with the energy of 3 children combined. Smith followed her cautiously, still adjusting to the unfamiliar environment filled with shouting kids, parents on benches, and dogs pulling at leashes. "Push me," Sarah yelled from the swing, kicking her legs wildly. Smith stepped behind her, gripped the chain lightly, and gave her a soft push. She frowned immediately. "Not like that," she instructed. "Higher." He blinked. "Higher?" "Yes, higher, like I'm flying." He pushed again, too gently for her taste. "No," she said with impatience only children could deliver. "Here, watch mommy." Michelle laughed and demonstrated with a smooth, confident push that sent Sarah soaring higher, squealing with joy. Smith tried again, following Michelle's guidance. This time Sarah let out a triumphant scream. "See?" Michelle teased. "Not too hard." He felt a flush of embarrassment mixed with pride. "I'm learning." "You are," she said softly. As Sarah swung back and forth, her laughter echoing through the park, Michelle stepped beside him. "She likes you." Smith kept his eyes on the child who was slowly pulling him into a world he never knew he needed. "It feels new," he admitted. "Different from anything I've known." Michelle studied him, not suspiciously, not protectively, but thoughtfully. "New can be good," she said quietly. Their eyes met again. There was no spark forced between them, no dramatic pull, just a warm, growing awareness that wasn't there before. Later, they sat on a bench while Sarah played with a group of kids building a sand structure. She took charge immediately, telling the others where to put small sticks and leaves. Smith watched her with wonder. "She's confident," he said. Michelle nodded. "She gets that from my mother." "You've done a good job with her," he said sincerely. Michelle swallowed, not expecting the compliment. "Thank you." "She's special," he added. Michelle nodded again. "She is." He hesitated before asking, "Did she ever ask about me before recently?" Michelle sighed. "Sometimes. But she didn't know your name, so she mostly asked why she didn't have what some other kids had." Smith's chest tightened. "I wish I had known." Michelle looked at him carefully. "I believe you. But believing isn't the same as trusting." He nodded slowly. "I understand." They fell silent, watching Sarah negotiate with another child over who got to use a small bucket first. "She's bossy," Smith observed. "Leader," Michelle corrected with a smirk. He smiled. "Leader." Ice cream was next. Sarah chose strawberry because it was the best color in the world, and Smith chose vanilla after staring at the menu like he was decoding a complex contract. Michelle found his confusion adorable. "Just pick one," she nudged. "I don't usually eat ice cream," he admitted. Sarah gasped dramatically. "That's illegal." Michelle choked on her own ice cream, laughing. "It's not illegal, sweetheart." "It should be," Sarah insisted. Smith raised his cone in surrender. "I'm fixing it today." Sarah approved. They sat on a bench overlooking the pond, light wind brushing across the water. Sarah swung her legs and hummed while licking her cone. She kept leaning against Smith's side, like she naturally gravitated toward him. And every time she did, something in him loosened. Michelle watched quietly, observing the ease between them, the natural comfort settling into their little trio. She saw something she never expected to see, Smith trying without ego, without distance, without pretense. She saw him lower himself to the level of a child, respond to her, listen to her, laugh with her. And it wasn't forced. It wasn't performed. It was genuine. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, he could be the father Sarah deserved. Smith glanced at Michelle, noticing her thoughtful silence. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said softly. "Just watching. Is that good or bad?" "I haven't decided yet," she replied honestly. He accepted that answer with a nod. As the sun dipped lower, Sarah's energy finally slowed. She leaned her head on Smith's shoulder, ice cream finished, face sticky, eyelids heavy. "I'm tired," she murmured. Smith froze again, not in fear, but in marvel. She rested against him as though this had been their routine for years. He placed a careful arm around her back, supporting her small weight. Michelle's heart tightened, not from pain, not from worry, but from the unexpected sight of the two people she loved most, forming a bond right in front of her. And with that bond came something she didn't want to admit: hope. Real, warm, frightening hope. Because growing closeness meant growing risk. Michelle knew better than to trust too quickly. But as she watched Smith hold their daughter with such gentle protectiveness, she couldn't help seeing parts of the man she once cared for. The man he had buried beneath responsibility and control. It scared her. It comforted her. It pulled her in two different directions at once. As they walked back toward the apartment, Sarah sleeping soundly in Smith's arms, Michelle realized something important. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about the possibility of a family she never imagined reclaiming. And that possibility terrified her, just as much as it tempted her. The evening grew darker as the three of them reached Michelle's apartment. Sarah slept soundly in Smith's arms, her cheek resting against his suit jacket, leaving a faint smear of melted ice cream on the fabric. Normally, Smith would have felt irritated about something staining his clothes, but tonight he didn't even notice. Michelle unlocked the door quietly. Smith carried Sarah to her room, following Michelle's gestures as she pointed the way. The small bedroom was decorated with soft pinks, scattered stuffed animals, and drawings taped proudly along the wall. As he placed Sarah gently onto her bed, she stirred, but only long enough to murmur something that sounded like his name before settling again. He paused. This time, it wasn't shock that froze him. It was something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years, an ache made of love he didn't know he had. Michelle watched him from the doorway, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. She saw how carefully he tucked the blanket around their daughter, how he made sure her stuffed bear was within reach, how he stood there a moment longer, just looking at her with quiet awe. He turned toward Michelle slowly. She met his gaze, but the softness she briefly let slip earlier had vanished, replaced by something harder to interpret. "Do you want to sit for a minute?" she asked, voice low. Smith nodded. They moved to the living room. The apartment felt smaller, without Sarah's noise filling it. Softer. More vulnerable. Michelle sat on one end of the couch, and Smith took the other. A comfortable distance separated them. But emotionally, the gap between them had never felt more complicated. For a moment, silence filled the room. Thick, thoughtful, almost heavy. Michelle finally broke it. "You were good with her today." Smith exhaled slowly. "I wasn't sure I would be. You did better than good," she said quietly. "She likes you. A lot." He nodded, but his eyes dropped to his hands resting in his lap. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Any of this. I've never been around kids. I've never been responsible for someone small and trusting and unpredictable." Michelle studied his face, noting the honesty etched into every word. He wasn't trying to win points. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was telling the truth, raw and uncomfortable. "She doesn't need perfection," Michelle said softly. "She needs effort, consistency, someone who shows up." He swallowed hard. I want to show up for her. I just don't know if I'll be enough." Hearing him say that stirred something in her, a memory of the man she met 4 years ago, the one who hid behind confidence but carried a loneliness he never admitted, the one who looked at her like she was the only person who truly saw him. "You're trying," she said. "That's more than you think." Smith leaned back, his expression conflicted. "Michelle, do you trust me at all?" The question lingered in the air. Michelle felt her chest tighten. Trust. That word didn't come easily to her, not anymore. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "Part of me wants to. Part of me is still scared." "Scared of what?" he asked. She took a slow breath. "Scared of letting you in. Scared of what happens if you change your mind. Scared of Sarah getting attached to you and then losing you. She deserves stability, and I can't gamble with her heart." Her voice trembled, barely, but enough for him to hear the years of strength behind it. He leaned forward slightly. "I'm not leaving. You left before," she whispered. His jaw tightened. Not in anger, regret. "I didn't choose that," he said quietly. "But I should have tried harder. I should have found you. I should have." He stopped. The rest of the sentence collapsed in his throat. Michelle didn't push him. She simply watched, her eyes searching his face for the truth beneath his words. "I'm not the same man I was then," he said. "At least, I'm trying not to be." Her eyes softened for a moment, but only for a moment. "Trying isn't the same as doing," she said. He nodded. "I know." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Michelle wrapped her arms around herself instinctively. I just need to be careful, for my sake, for Sarah's. I can't let history repeat itself. Her last sentence struck him with more force than she intended. He lowered his head, the weight of her words sitting squarely on his shoulders. I understand why you're cautious, he said. I would be too. Michelle looked at him again. Really looked. His expression wasn't defensive. It wasn't prideful. It wasn't distant. He looked human, bruised by his own choices, but trying to rebuild something from their ruins. She hesitated before asking, "Why didn't you tell me what happened? Back then?" His breath caught. This was the question he feared, the one that clawed at his conscience, the one he knew would eventually rise between them like a wall he had to confront or lose everything. He opened his mouth to answer, but stopped, not because he didn't want to tell her, but because he didn't know if he had the right words yet. Michelle saw the conflict flicker in his eyes and felt her heart pull in two directions, one toward hope, the other toward caution. "You're hiding something," she said softly. "Something important." Smith looked away. His hands tightened. His breath grew uneven. "I'm not hiding it because I want to," he said quietly. "I just need to find the right way to tell you. It's not simple." Michelle stiffened. "Secrets aren't a good start, Smith." "I know," he whispered. "But this is something I have to explain fully, or it'll sound like an excuse, and I don't want to give you another excuse." Their eyes met again. This time, neither looked away. Tension curled between them, not romantic tension, but emotional tension, the kind that builds before a truth finally breaks loose. Michelle stood slowly. "When you're ready to talk, I'll listen. But don't wait too long." Smith nodded, the realization settling in his chest. If he wanted a real chance at this family, he would have to reveal the truth he'd buried for years, a truth that could bring them closer, or break everything again. The next morning, Smith stood in front of his bathroom mirror, palms pressed against the counter, eyes fixed on his own reflection. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he replayed Michelle's words from the night before. "You're hiding something, something important." She wasn't wrong. He had carried that truth for years, quiet, heavy, and lodged in a part of him he never wanted to revisit. But if he wanted Michelle to trust him, if he wanted Sarah to have a father who deserved her, he couldn't hide anymore. He straightened his posture, adjusted the collar of his shirt, and breathed slowly. Today, he would tell her everything. Michelle opened the door before he knocked. Her face carried the calm of someone expecting a serious conversation, though her eyes revealed a quiet storm underneath. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. He entered slowly. Sarah was still asleep in her room, giving them privacy. Michelle motioned toward the couch. "Sit." He did. She didn't sit beside him. She took the chair across from him, distance that spoke louder than any words. "All right," she started. "You said you needed to explain." Smith inhaled deeply. "I owe you the truth about why I disappeared." Michelle folded her arms, bracing herself. "Go ahead." He didn't rush. He didn't sugarcoat. He let the truth speak plainly. "My father controlled everything about my life back then. My time, my decisions, my career, even my relationships." He paused. "Especially my relationships." Michelle frowned. "What does that mean?" "He believed any personal connection made me weak," Smith said quietly. "Especially connections he couldn't control." Michelle's jaw tightened. "So, what happened the morning after we met?" Smith lowered his gaze. "He called at dawn, told me to be on the first flight to New York, ordered me to end anything that could distract me from the company. He had access to my schedule, my location, everything. He knew where I was." Michelle stiffened. "He controlled your location?" "Yes." The admission tasted bitter. "He said if I stayed, he'd replace me at the company. He held my entire future like it belonged to him." Michelle's eyes softened, but only slightly. "And you left," she said quietly. "I did," he whispered. "But I didn't want to." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I wrote that note because I thought I'd have a chance to explain later. But when I returned to Chicago months later and tried to reach you, your number was different. And I didn't know your last name." Michelle blinked. "I changed my number because I moved. It had nothing to do with you." "I know that now," he said gently. "But at the time, every attempt I made hit a wall. And as the years passed, I convinced myself you had moved on, that maybe I was the one who held on too long. Michelle looked down at her hands. You should have tried harder. I know. His voice broke, honest and raw. And not trying harder is one of the biggest regrets of my life. Silence washed between them. Not harsh, not cold, just full of years they couldn't reclaim. Michelle finally spoke. Why didn't you fight him? Why let him decide everything? Smith's chest tightened. This was the part he hated admitting. Because for most of my life, he convinced me I wasn't enough without him. He built the company, and he made sure I believed I owed him everything. Walking away didn't feel like an option back then. Michelle looked up, pain and understanding blending in her eyes. And now? She asked, softly. Now, Smith said with certainty, no one controls my life but me. Not the company, not my past, not him. Michelle absorbed that quietly. Is he still in your life? No. Smith shook his head. When I took over the company fully, I made sure he stepped down. He hated it. But I couldn't let him run my life forever. Michelle leaned back, processing everything. So you left because he forced you? Yes. You didn't come back because you couldn't find me? Yes. And you regret it? Every day. Her eyes lifted to meet his. Why tell me now? He swallowed, emotion thickening his voice. Because you asked if I was hiding something. And you were right. I've lived with this for years, but I refuse to let it be the reason I lose you again. Michelle's breath caught slightly, not because of romance, but because of truth finally finding air. And Sarah? She asked. What does all this mean for her? It means I will never disappear again, Smith said firmly. Not because of work, not because of pressure, not because of fear. I want to be her father, and I want to earn the chance to stand beside both of you. Michelle looked at him long and hard, seeing not a perfect man, but a man willing to confront the hardest parts of his past. She didn't forgive him instantly, but something inside her shifted, a crack in the wall she built, a small opening she didn't expect to feel. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. Smith nodded, relief mixing with uncertainty. We're not fixed, she added. I know, and I'm still scared. I know, he said softly. But I'm here. I'm not running from this. Michelle exhaled, her shoulders softening just a little. All right. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't rejection. It was the beginning of something honest, something real. And for the first time in years, Smith felt like he could breathe. The call came early Monday morning, long before Smith reached the office. His assistant's voice trembled slightly through the speakerphone. You might want to prepare yourself before coming in today. Smith straightened. Why? What happened? It's the board, she said quietly. They called an emergency meeting. They want you here in 20 minutes. He didn't need more explanation. He already knew what this was about. Word had reached them. His visits to the South Side, his unexpected absences, his shifts in priority. In their eyes, he was slipping. He hung up, exhaled slowly, and stared out the window of his penthouse. The skyline looked colder today, sharper somehow, as if the city itself sensed the coming confrontation. He grabbed his coat, tightened the buttons, and headed out. The boardroom carried its usual sterile chill. Polished table, leather chairs, and faces that had judged him for years. Men and women who respected numbers more than humanity. People who called him a visionary, as long as his choices aligned with their interests. The moment he entered, all eyes shifted to him. Smith, one of the older board members said, adjusting his glasses, please take a seat. Smith didn't. Tell me what this is about. A woman near the end of the table spoke first. We have concerns about your recent behavior. Concerns? He repeated calmly. Yes, another board member said. You've been spending time in an area of the city that frankly raises questions. His jaw tightened, but he simply asked, what questions? The man cleared his throat. Concerns about safety, optics, decision-making, distractions. Distractions. He knew that word well. It was the same word his father used whenever anything threatened control. Another board member slid a stack of photos across the table. Grainy shots of him walking beside Michelle, carrying grocery bags, staying late in her neighborhood, holding Sarah's hand. As you can see, the man said, your presence there has been noticed. By who? Smith asked. Investors, the man replied. Partners. People who believe your priorities are shifting in an unpredictable direction. Smith felt heat rising in his chest, not from embarrassment, but from anger. So, spending time with my family is unpredictable? He asked. The room went silent. One of the board members leaned forward. Family? You never mentioned family before. I didn't know I had a daughter until recently, he said evenly. Now I do. A murmur spread across the table, whispers, judgment, the subtle tightening of faces. Another voice chimed in. Smith, you've built this company with discipline, consistency. We respect that. But this situation you're involved in. Say it, Smith said, his tone steady but cold. What exactly is my situation? The man hesitated. A personal entanglement that risks your leadership focus. Smith let out a slow breath, steadying the fire building inside him. Her name is Michelle, and my daughter's name is Sarah. The silence thickened. The board chair clasped his hands. This company has standards. Visibility matters. Optics matter. The places you visit matter. The people you associate with matter. Investors want reassurance that you are still fully committed. Smith stared at them one by one, seeing not colleagues but chains, each link forged from expectation, image, and control. I'm fully committed to running this company, he said, but I'm also committed to being a father. Both can exist. The chair shook his head. Not in the way you're approaching it. You're losing balance. We've received calls about your absence during peak hours, missed briefings, delayed decisions. I missed one briefing, Smith corrected. Because I was meeting my daughter for the first time. That's exactly our concern, another board member snapped. Your personal life is interfering with your role. Investors don't like instability. Smith inhaled sharply, not in fear, but in disbelief. Instability? You're calling my daughter instability? She represents unpredictability, the man insisted. That environment is far removed from where this company operates. Smith stood straighter, taller, colder. He suddenly saw the board for what it really was, an extension of the control he spent years escaping. You're worried about where I go? He asked. About a neighborhood you don't understand? About people you've never met? It's about company reputation, the chair insisted. If you can't maintain the image that built this corporation, then perhaps what? Smith demanded. Say it. The chair exhaled. Perhaps it's time for new leadership. Silence exploded into the room like thunder. Smith had expected resistance, but not this. Not so blatant, not so bold. He stared at them for a long moment, then slowly shook his head. You know what's funny? He said, voice calm but dangerously honest. You all claim to care about discipline, dedication, and strength, but you have no idea what real strength looks like. Several board members stiffened. Real strength isn't hiding behind your title, he continued. It isn't choosing image over humanity. It isn't running a company so tightly that you forget you're a person. He stepped closer to the table. For the first time in years, I am choosing something not driven by profit or pressure. I'm choosing my family. Are you saying the company is no longer your priority? A woman asked sharply. Smith looked her directly in the eye. I'm saying I refuse to lose my daughter the way my father tried to make me lose myself. The room fell silent. One of the board members scoffed. If this is your stance, then you make our decision easy. You're endangering the company. Smith straightened his shoulders. No. What endangers this company is a leadership team afraid of human connection. You're out of line, the chair growled. No, Smith said. I'm finally in line with something that matters. He gathered the photos from the table, slid them toward himself, and spoke with finality. If being a father costs me this position, then this position was never worth having. The board stared at him, shocked, speechless, uncertain how to respond to a man who had just dismantled everything they believed defined strength. I'll expect your decision in writing, Smith said calmly. Then he walked out, head high, heart pounding, but lighter than he had felt in years. Not because he chose to fight them, but because, for the first time, he chose himself and the people waiting for him on the south side. Michelle was folding laundry when her phone buzzed again. She almost didn't check it. She expected another reminder from the clinic or an automated message. But when she saw Smith's name, her hands froze mid-fold. He rarely called without texting first. She answered quickly. Smith? His breath came through the line, not rushed, but heavy. like he had just walked out of a storm. "Are you home?" he asked. "Yes," she replied slowly. "Is everything all right? I need to see you." Those words carried a gravity she wasn't used to hearing from him. She didn't ask questions, didn't press for explanations. Something in his tone told her the conversation needed to happen face to face. "I'll be here," she said softly. 20 minutes later, she heard a knock. When she opened the door, Smith stood there, not polished, not perfectly composed, but visibly shaken. His tie was loosened, his expression tired, and his usually sharp posture slightly slumped. This wasn't the CEO the world saw. This wasn't the controlled man she used to know. This was someone fighting a war no one else could see. "Come in," she said immediately. He stepped inside without a word. The moment the door closed, he exhaled, long and broken, as though he had been holding it in since the moment he left the boardroom. Michelle watched him quietly. She didn't rush him, didn't force him to speak. She simply waited. After several seconds, Smith ran a hand through his hair and sank onto the couch. "The board tried to push me out today," he said finally. Michelle's eyes widened. "What? Why?" He looked up at her, and she saw a mixture of disbelief, anger, and strangely, relief. "Because I chose you and Sarah," he said. "Because they saw where I've been going. Because they assumed I was losing control. They called my family, my daughter, an instability." Michelle's stomach tightened. "They said that?" "Yes." She sat down slowly across from him. "So what did you do?" He met her gaze with a clarity she hadn't seen before. "I told them if being a father cost me the position, then the position was never worth it." Michelle inhaled sharply. She didn't expect that. Not from him. Not from the man whose identity had been woven into his professional world for so long. "You said that?" she whispered. "Yes," he replied, voice steady. "I chose my family. I chose what mattered, and I don't regret it." Her eyes softened, not with romance, but with something deeper, recognition. He wasn't just saying words. His presence, his exhaustion, his vulnerability, it was all real. Michelle rubbed her hands together. "Smith, that job is everything you built, everything you worked for." He nodded. "I know. And you'd walk away?" "I already have," he said quietly. "Not officially, but emotionally. I let it go the moment they tried to reduce my daughter to a liability." She looked at him with a mix of awe and fear. "Why? Why would you do that?" He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Because my whole life was shaped by a man who chose power over family. I refused to become him. I refused to let a title dictate the kind of father I am allowed to be." Michelle's heart thudded. Hard. He wasn't just trying. He was changing. Not in words. In choices. Life-altering choices. She couldn't deny the impact of what she was hearing. She couldn't ignore the sincerity behind his actions. But fear still crept along the edges of her thoughts. "What if you regret it?" she asked softly. "What if one day you wake up and realize you lost your company because of us?" His eyes softened. "I didn't lose it. I outgrew the version of myself who let it control my entire identity." She held his stare, trying to reconcile the man she once knew with the man sitting in front of her now. He continued, "Michelle, I'm not asking you to forgive me for the past overnight. I'm not asking you to step back into my life completely. I just want the chance to build something real, with Sarah, and hopefully with you. But only if you choose that too." Her breath caught. Choice. She had been forced to make choices alone for years. Choices that weighed on her heart and shaped every day of her life. Hearing him offer the possibility of choosing together felt both frightening and healing. Michelle stood and walked toward the window, needing space to think. The city beyond her glass was busy, full of noise and movement, but her apartment was quiet, so quiet she could hear the rhythm of her own heartbeat. She remembered the Smith she once knew. Rigid, guarded, confident to the point of arrogance. And now, this Smith was humbled, open, willing. He didn't run from conflict. He walked straight into it, ready to sacrifice the world he built to become part of hers. She turned back toward him slowly. "Smith," she said gently, "I need to be honest with you." He stood too, bracing himself. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "I don't know how to trust you fully. I don't know if I'm ready to risk my heart again." And I don't know how to protect Sarah from getting hurt. Her voice wavered slightly, but she didn't look away. But, she continued, I also see you trying. I see the effort. I see the choices you're making. And I can't pretend it doesn't matter. Smith swallowed, waiting. Michelle stepped closer, not closing the gap entirely, but shortening it enough to show the shift inside her. If you're staying, she whispered, really staying, then maybe we can build something. Slowly, carefully. Together. Smith's chest rose with a deep breath, one filled with relief, gratitude, and a tenderness he struggled to express. I'm staying, he said softly. I'm not going anywhere. The tension in the room eased, not completely, but enough. Enough to let hope enter without fear swallowing it whole. Enough to let the past stop choking the future. Enough to let something new begin. Michelle nodded gently. All right. A small, vulnerable smile formed on Smith's lips. All right. For the first time, they stood not as strangers reconnecting, nor as two people tied by an unexpected child, but as two adults choosing to rebuild something broken, piece by piece. And sometimes, that choice is louder than love. My love, before we move to the next chapter, please like this story and share your thoughts in the comments, because your engagement helps this channel grow and keeps powerful stories like this coming your way. The days following Smith's confrontation with the board marked the quiet beginning of something new, something neither Michelle nor Smith expected to take shape so naturally. There was no dramatic announcement, no sudden shift in routine. Instead, small changes began to weave into their daily lives, pulling all three of them into a rhythm neither forced nor rushed. Michelle noticed the first change on a Wednesday afternoon. She was helping Sarah color at the kitchen table when her phone buzzed. Smith, can I bring dinner tonight? Something simple, nothing fancy. She stared at the message, surprised. Michelle had expected him to drift into a cautious, distant role after his emotional confession, maybe overwhelmed, maybe uncertain of what came next. Instead, he was reaching out, gently, consistently. She typed back, Michelle, sure, but remember, she likes rice. His reply came instantly. Smith, I'm learning. Michelle tried not to smile too hard. When Smith arrived, he carried a bag filled with takeout containers from a local spot Michelle recognized. He stepped inside, unsure of the proper way to enter a home that still felt new to him. Sarah ran to the door. Did you bring food? I did, he said, kneeling to her level. But I need help setting the table. She placed her hands on her hips. You don't know how? He blinked. Not really. Michelle laughed from the kitchen. He's telling the truth. The three of them gathered around the small table. Sarah assigned everyone a task. You get the forks, she told Michelle. You get the plates, she told Smith. And I get to taste the rice to make sure it's good. Smith watched her as if she were a tiny supervisor handing out responsibilities. He followed each instruction carefully, asking questions, double-checking details. It was awkward. It was endearing. It was real. At one point, he held the stack of bowls like they were foreign objects. Do these go here or here? Michelle tried not to laugh. Here. And don't put them near the edge. Why not? He asked. Sarah answered, because mommy drops things sometimes. Michelle gasped. Sarah. Smith smiled. Noted. Once everything was set, Sarah sat in her usual chair and took a big bite of rice. She nodded solemnly. It's good. Smith let out a relieved breath. Thank you. Dinner wasn't elegant, but it was warm. Michelle noticed how easily Smith adjusted to their small rituals. Sarah talking non-stop, the sound of the television in the background, the clutter of crayons on the counter. He didn't shrink away. He didn't act out of place. He leaned into it, learning their world one detail at a time. After dinner, Sarah demanded a movie night. Smith froze when she handed him the remote. What do I do? He whispered to Michelle. Just press play, she whispered back. He pressed the wrong button, and the screen went black. Sarah groaned. He broke it. Smith panicked. I didn't break anything, did I? Michelle walked over and fixed it with one click. There. Smith stared at the remote like it had insulted him personally. Sarah sighed dramatically. You need training. Michelle nearly collapsed laughing. She's not wrong. Later in the evening, Sarah curled up on the couch with her head in Michelle's lap. Smith sat beside them, unsure whether he was sitting too close or not close enough. But Michelle didn't move away. She let the closeness settle naturally. He glanced at her. "Is this okay?" he asked softly. She looked at him, her voice calm. "Yes." He relaxed. It wasn't a romantic moment, yet it held a tenderness deeper than any gesture he'd made before. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to win approval. He was simply present. For a man who lived by control, schedules, and structure, presence was the last thing Michelle expected from him. And yet here he was, watching cartoons with a small child sprawled across them, eating takeout instead of gourmet meals, allowing himself to laugh when Sarah climbed into his lap without warning and announced, "You sit weird." Smith didn't even know how to respond. What? You sit like a chair froze you." Michelle burst into laughter again. Smith ran a hand through his hair, flustered. "I'll work on that." Sarah nodded like a tiny instructor. "Yeah, you need to learn how to relax." For once in his life, Smith didn't argue. As the night faded and Sarah drifted off to sleep on the couch, Michelle lifted her gently, preparing to take her to bed. Smith stood quickly. "I can carry her," he said. "If you want." Michelle hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." He lifted Sarah carefully, holding her with steady arms. Michelle watched him closely, not because she doubted him, but because the sight stirred something steady and warm inside her. He wasn't just present, he was committed, in quiet, simple ways no one else noticed but her. When he returned to the living room, Michelle spoke softly. "You're trying." He met her gaze. "I want to get this right." Her chest tightened, not in fear this time, but in something closer to hope. "It's new for all of us," she admitted, "but today felt good." He nodded slowly. "It did?" Michelle took a breath. "If we're going to build something, Smith, it has to be steady. Slow. Real." "I understand," he said, "and I can't promise I won't get scared sometimes." "Then I'll stay steady," he replied gently. Those words sank into her, warm and calming. She didn't step closer. She didn't run either. She simply whispered, "Okay." Smith let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Their new reality wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It wasn't smooth. But it was real. And it was theirs. And for the first time, Michelle felt the foundation of something strong forming. Slowly, tenderly, naturally. A family beginning to blend, one day at a time. The shift in their relationship didn't happen with one big moment. It happened in the small ones, the ones Michelle once believed didn't matter, yet somehow mattered more than everything else. It started with mornings. One Saturday, Michelle woke to the sound of clattering in the kitchen. Her heart jumped, her instinct always expecting trouble, but when she walked in cautiously, she found Smith standing over the stove, staring at a skillet like it was a complicated machine. "What are you doing?" she asked, amused. He turned with an expression halfway between pride and panic. "Making breakfast." "For who?" "You and Sarah," he said, gesturing toward two mismatched plates. "I looked up a recipe. It said it was easy." Michelle walked over and peeked at the pan. "You're burning it." "I know," he admitted. "But I'm trying." That sentence struck her in a way she didn't expect. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't pretending to be. He was showing effort, real, imperfect effort. She reached over, turned down the heat, and said gently, "You don't have to impress us." "I'm not trying to impress you," he said quietly. "I'm trying to be part of this." Her chest softened. She stepped closer, not touching him, but close enough to feel the warmth between them. "Thank you," she whispered. Before he could respond, Sarah marched into the kitchen, hair sticking in every direction. "Is that smoke?" she asked bluntly. "No," Smith said too quickly. "Yes," Michelle corrected. Sarah squinted at the pan. "Did he cook that?" "Yes," Michelle said again. Sarah sighed. "He needs lessons." Michelle laughed. Smith accepted his fate. But the moment, simple, ordinary, carried an intimacy Michelle hadn't felt in years. The intimacy of routine, of mornings shared, of someone trying for her, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The next shift happened at the clinic where Michelle worked. One afternoon, she struggled with a mountain of paperwork after a long day. Smith arrived to pick her up, stepping inside quietly. He watched her for a moment, her tired shoulders, her focused stare, her hands moving through forms that seemed endless. "You work too hard," he said. She looked up, surprised. "I'm almost done." He pulled up a chair beside her. "What can I help with?" She laughed softly. "You don't do paperwork. I'll learn." He meant it, and when she handed him a stack of forms, he actually tried. He messed up a few sections, and she had to redo them, but he didn't leave. He didn't walk away. He stayed until the last sheet was filed. When she finally finished, she leaned back and exhaled deeply. "I didn't expect you to sit through all that." He shrugged. "You sat through my stiffness, my awkward moments, my terrible attempts at cooking. Consider this payback." She smiled, not politely, not cautiously, but with warmth she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. "Thank you," she said softly. He held her gaze. "I want to make your life easier when I can." Her heart tightened, gently, sweetly. Not in fear this time, but in appreciation. Over the next weeks, Smith slowly learned how to loosen up. He started laughing at himself more often, at the way Sarah poked fun at his stiff posture, at how he struggled to open juice boxes, at how he couldn't tell the difference between two nearly identical hair bows during one of Sarah's outfit debates. One afternoon at the park, Sarah insisted he join her on the slide. He stared at it like it was a dangerous piece of equipment. "Michelle, that doesn't look safe." "It's a slide," she deadpanned. "A tall slide." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Come on." And so he climbed, slowly, cautiously, gripping the rail like it might betray him. When he reached the top, Michelle held back a laugh. "You're supposed to sit," she called. "I know," he said stiffly. Sarah slid down beside him with ease. "Now you." He took a breath, sat down awkwardly, and pushed off. The slide carried him faster than he expected. He reached the bottom with a thump, hair out of place, expression stunned. Michelle burst into laughter. Sarah threw her hands in the air. He did it. Smith adjusted his shirt, trying to regain dignity. That was faster than anticipated. Michelle wiped a tear of laughter. "You're doing great." And he was. Not perfect, not graceful, but open, present, trying. Every day, he shed another layer of the rigid CEO persona he had wrapped himself in for years. And every day, Michelle let herself lean on him just a little more. Not fully, not recklessly, but enough to feel supported. Enough to feel like she wasn't carrying the weight of her world alone anymore. Their intimacy grew not from grand gestures, but from quiet ones. When Michelle fell asleep on the couch after a long day, Smith covered her with a blanket. When Smith stayed late helping Sarah build a paper fort, Michelle brought him a glass of water without being asked. When Michelle looked overwhelmed, Smith offered to take Sarah to the park so she could rest. When Smith seemed tense, Michelle invited him to sit beside her with no expectation, no pressure, just presence. These moments built a tenderness that wrapped around them slowly, softly. A tenderness they didn't speak about, but felt deeply. One night, after Sarah went to bed, they sat together on the couch watching an old movie. Their arms brushed, just barely. Neither moved away. Michelle glanced at him. "You're getting comfortable here." He looked back at her. "I want to." Her breath caught for a moment before she whispered, "Me too." It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a declaration. It was permission. A small, gentle doorway opened between them. Smith reached out, not boldly, not assuming, and let his fingers brush hers. She didn't pull back. For the first time in years, Michelle allowed someone to hold her hand without fear stealing the moment. And Smith held her hand like it was something precious, something earned, not taken. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Their hands spoke for them. Soft pressure, steady warmth, quiet acceptance, the beginning of trust rebuilt. The beginning of something tender. The beginning of a love reborn not through passion alone, but through presence. Real, steady, healing presence. Sarah finally calling him Dad. The shift happened on a Sunday morning, one of those calm, slow-moving mornings where the world outside felt quiet, almost gentle. Michelle was in the kitchen making pancakes while humming under her breath, the scent of warm batter filling the apartment. Smith stood beside her, pouring juice with the same concentration he once used for million-dollar contracts. Sarah, still in her pajamas, bounced between them like a tiny comet, with no predictable orbit. "Are the pancakes ready yet?" she asked for the fourth time. "Almost," Michelle replied. "Be patient." "I'm trying," Sarah insisted dramatically. Smith smiled. "You're doing great." Sarah glanced up at him, then looked away quickly, as if she were thinking about something too big for her small frame. She climbed onto her chair and waited, swinging her feet. When Michelle placed a stack of pancakes in front of her, Sarah grinned. "Thank you, Mommy." Then she turned to Smith, opened her mouth, hesitated, and something quiet, something powerful passed between Michelle and Smith, as they both watched her gather courage she didn't fully understand. She whispered, barely audible, "Thank you, Dad." Time froze. Smith didn't breathe. Michelle didn't move. And Sarah seemed unaware that she had just opened a door no one had dared push. Michelle's heart thundered as she looked at Smith. His eyes softened, first with surprise, then with something deeper, something raw and overwhelming. His jaw tightened the way it always did when emotion rushed too fast for him to control. "Can you say that again?" he asked gently. Sarah held a piece of pancake on her fork and shrugged casually. "I said thank you, Dad." This time it wasn't shy. This time it was certainty. This time it was belonging. Smith blinked rapidly, fighting a wave of emotion that threatened to break through his usually composed demeanor. He placed a hand over his chest instinctively, as if steadying a heart that didn't know how to hold this new feeling. "Sarah." His voice cracked in the middle. Thank you." She nodded like it wasn't a big deal at all. "Well, you're here a lot, and you carry me when I'm sleepy. And you buy rice." Michelle covered her mouth to stop a laugh, but her eyes glistened. Smith reached out a hand. Sarah placed her tiny hand in his without hesitation. That one small gesture sealed something unspoken between them, something that didn't need grand speeches or declarations. It was simple. It was pure. It was real. Smith had become her father, not by force or obligation, but through presence, consistency, and love that grew quietly in all the spaces he once believed were empty. Later that afternoon, they walked together to the park. Sarah skipped ahead, humming loudly while carrying her new kite. Michelle and Smith walked behind her, matching each other's pace without needing to try. "She called you Dad," Michelle said softly. Smith's gaze stayed on Sarah as she danced around the pathway. "I've never felt anything like that," he whispered. "Not in my entire life." Michelle studied him carefully. "You're good with her." "I'm learning from both of you," he said. Michelle felt warmth glide through her, a warmth she hadn't expected to feel again so deeply. She reached out and touched his arm, a quiet gesture of reassurance. "You're doing more than learning," she said. "You're showing up. You're building something with her every day. She sees that." He looked at her, emotion rising in his eyes. "And you, what do you see?" She hesitated, not out of fear, but because the truth inside her felt heavy with meaning. "I see a man who changed," she whispered. "A man who faced his past instead of hiding behind it. A man who chose family even when it cost him everything." Smith swallowed hard. "Michelle?" She shook her head gently, stopping him before he could say more. "Let me finish," she said softly. "I see a man who tries, who listens, who stays, and somewhere along the way, I started feeling something I haven't let myself feel in a long time." Smith stepped closer. "What is that?" She looked up at him, vulnerability and courage merging into one steady gaze. "Love," she whispered. The words settled into the air between them, soft, certain, undeniable. Smith exhaled sharply, a hand lifting toward her, but stopping just before touching her face. "Michelle," his voice trembled with sincerity. "I love you. I've loved you longer than I knew how to say." Her chest tightened, but not with fear. This time, with peace. A peace she had never imagined reclaiming. She reached up, gently guiding his hand to her cheek. "We did this slowly, carefully, honestly, and now, I'm ready." He leaned forward, not rushed, not hungry, but tender. Their lips met in a soft kiss, a kiss built from months of rebuilding, forgiveness, trust, and quiet devotion. It wasn't fiery or dramatic. It was steady, warm, and grounding, the kind of kiss that didn't demand anything but offered everything. When they pulled apart, Sarah shouted from ahead, Stop kissing. The wind is perfect. Come help me fly this kite. Michelle laughed, wiping a tear from her cheek. We're coming. Smith chuckled softly, his arm brushing hers as they walked toward their daughter. Together. At the park, the three of them ran across the open field. Smith held the kite steady while Sarah sprinted with the string. Michelle laughed as they chased after the kite together, the afternoon sun setting in warm colors across the sky. As the kite rose higher and higher, Sarah squealed with delight. We did it. Smith lifted her in his arms, spinning her gently. No, you did it. Michelle watched them, her family, and felt something settle inside her. Not fear, not uncertainty, not the ache of the past. Peace, love, belonging. She walked over to them and wrapped her arms around both Smith and Sarah. The three of them held onto each other as the kite soared above, a symbol of everything they rebuilt. Just a family formed through truth, effort, forgiveness, and love that grew naturally over time. Some families are born. Some are built through patience and second chances. And some, like Michelle, Smith, and Sarah, are shaped by courage, forgiveness, and the choice to love again. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story touched your heart today, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more people who need them.